Boom, we are live. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome to the Nolan Hawkeye Anthony YouTube channel. And I thank all of you for being here wherever you may be. And of course, however you may be listening. So we got a few topics on the docket for today. I want to touch upon Iowa men's basketball, specifically Fran McCaffery, and I want to concisely articulate what my expectation is, and thus what I think your expectation should be of Fran McCaffery. And I want to give a realistic assessment of whether we should feel, maybe happy is not the right word, but confident or okay with Fran McCaffery at the helm now, and at least for the next couple of years. I want to touch upon Iowa wrestling. I'll probably do that story first. And then I want to revisit the Kadyn Proctor story now that some more information has dropped. I mean, I don't want to sugarcoat it. There hasn't been a ton of new information that has dropped. I mean, to tell you the truth, the speculation has been as much from quote unquote insiders as it has been on people kind of on the peripherals, because at the end of the day, unless Kadyn Proctor is willing to completely divulge and just say, hey, this is why I left Iowa for a second straight time, uh, all there is going to be is speculation. But I did check out Hawk Insider's immediate video or recording where they reacted to Kadyn Proctor the day of the announced departure that was first dropped by Scott Docterman at The Athletic. By the way, guys, I hope you guys consider smashing that subscribe button. It really helps the channel out. But what helps it even more is the engagement, commenting, leaving a like, or even a dislike. Really helps with the video being promoted by YouTube. I would love for the channel to get to 2,000 subscribers by the time the next football season rolls around. As you guys know, I'm super grateful for all of you guys who have joined me on this journey. And I always say the one unique thing that you get by listening to somebody like myself is I am not affiliated with any of these organizations or news organizations such as the Gazette or anything like that. And I'm going to touch upon this when I discuss Kadyn Proctor. But when there are people, and you guys can take this for what it is worth, and maybe you disagree, and that's fine. But when you are affiliated and are like an official individual who covers a certain team or whatever the case may be, there's a certain bias that inevitably occurs unless the person is completely okay with perhaps not having certain interviews or certain contacts or certain relationships due to what they have to say, because they are more concerned with stating their real beliefs than sugarcoating it and kind of giving this haphazard response. For example, and I'm not necessarily throwing shade. I'm just giving you guys an example. Okay, all of the individuals, such as Scott Docterman, such as a David Eicholt or a Sean Bach, or all of these individuals that are attached to an organization, you're never ever, and this has been my experience from what I have seen with their responses, you're never going to get a complete, unadulterated, honest answer on specific subjects. Now, like I said, I am going to revisit this when I actually touch upon the Kadyn Proctor, because I actually, surprisingly, I think David Eicholt did a good job with this. But most of the time, you're not going to get a transparent, honest answer because they don't want to burn bridges with athletes, with coaches, with their organization, and things like that. So when it's somebody like myself who is just a content creator that's not attached to any of these organizations, it doesn't matter to me. It doesn't matter to me if somebody like Kadyn Proctor watches my video and says "F that dude," or an Iowa player watches that and say, "Oh, that dude doesn't know what he's talking about." It doesn't matter because it's not going to affect the honesty that I give to you guys on any particular situation. It's going to remain the same no matter what. So for what it's worth, I just wanted to say that, and I do try to get to all the comments that I can. Like I always say, as long as they're respectful, and I think that you're actually giving a legitimate argument, whether I agree with it or disagree, I will 9 times out of 10 respond to that comment. All right, let's move it along here. So let's start with Iowa wrestling. Iowa finished 5th in the team standings, and I was kind of at the NCAA wrestling tournament, and I was kind of conflicted by this because on one hand, Iowa did, of course, lose 2 of their top wrestlers that were more than definitely one of them, but likely both of them in Nelson Brands and I think it's Caliendo or whatever his last name here. I'll get it when I get it pulled up here. They were likely going to be in the start. It's the guy who's at like one of the heavier weight classes. They were going to be in the starting lineup, and of course, they got hit up with the investigation, which definitely affected a lot of the sports. I would say Iowa basketball pretty much was unscathed from the gambling investigation, as the only player who did end up getting in trouble with that actually decided to transfer in Aaron Eulis. So while that is true, the fact is that the expectation for Iowa wrestling is similar or akin to Alabama fans for Alabama football, or Duke fans for Duke basketball, or North Carolina fans for North Carolina basketball. Okay. It's not a like for like comparison because every sport has its unique differences, especially with the landscape and the competitiveness across the country as far as all the programs go. I would say wrestling is definitely top heavy because not every school has a wrestling program, and the ones that do are either Power Five or like a Harvard or like an Air Force and schools like that. And so, you know, the resources that are put into a sport like wrestling is not the same. And it's, you look at a sport like football, okay, across the board, pretty much every school puts most of their resources into football because it's the sport that contributes or produces the most money. In wrestling across the country, that's not the case. A school like Iowa versus a school like Air Force are going to produce far different results when it comes to the profitability of the sport. And so the reason why I bring up the profitability is that directly impacts the amount of resources that can be put into that sport. Nonetheless, the expectation for Iowa wrestling is to compete for national team titles. It just is what it is. And to produce national champs or runner up, or at the very least, top 8 at every single weight class. Okay. And if that's too much, producing top 8 at over half of the weight classes. Okay. So in this NCAA tournament, I don't believe this go around. I don't believe Iowa even produced a wrestler at the heaviest weight class. So they lost points just by not even qualifying somebody at that weight class. Now, again, the person who is expected to be their representative at that weight class got caught up with the gambling investigations. But let's read a little bit of this. This is from Hawk Central. Kansas City. Following Drake Iaea's loss in Saturday's NCAA. By the way, I was very lucky to interview Drake Iaea back in the day. I'm very happy that he's having success. It would have been nice had he won the national championship, but finishing second is a really cool result as well. Like I said, I have family who live in Fort Dodge and family who are close friends with Drake Iaea's family. Iowa wrestling coach Tom Brands didn't want to evaluate the 2023-24 season that was for the Iowa Hawkeyes. Now, before we even continue, I also want to say, in my assessment of Iowa wrestling's results, and by the way, guys, I am not the most knowledgeable when it comes to wrestling. This admittingly, I'm more coming at this about from a perspective of what is my expectation for Iowa wrestling and where are things at in reality. My assessment is not just going to be the result from the NCAA tournament. It's also going to be how Iowa performed in the regular season. And even within the regular season, I think Iowa unfortunately did underperform. Okay. Before he can do that, self-reflection with the coaching staff and team must come first. It's too early to get analytical, Brand said. I say that a lot. You don't start talking about what needs to happen. You don't just start. The analytics tell two stories for Iowa. The Hawkeyes finished the national tournament in 5th place with 4 All-Americans. Their smallest podium group since 2013, when they also had 4. Mike Evans, Ethan Lofthouse, Tony Ramos, and current Iowa State assistant Derek St. John. Team trophies were given only to the top 3 teams this year instead of the longstanding 4 trophies that traditionally had been awarded. Regardless of that change, Iowa would have finished without a team trophy. This is the first time since 2016 that Iowa has not won a team trophy at the NCAAs. And I remember that too. I was in college at the time, and it was like a big thing how Iowa wrestling underperformed that year, and changes were made, and the program was revamped, and there was immense pressure for the program to improve. And Tom Brands took a valid introspection at the program and made some changes. Now, have all of the changes yielded the results that they have looked for? Maybe, maybe not. Iowa does have the one national championship, which is not bad. But, again, the expectation for Iowa wrestling is to be where Penn State is at, or at the very least, be a notch below where Penn State is at, where every year you are competitive and do have a realistic shot at winning the team national championship. 2016 is also the last time the Hawkeyes have ended national without a team trophy and an individual NCAA champion. To put even more salt on the wound, rival Iowa State finished ahead of Iowa for the first time since 2007, when Cale Sanderson was coaching in Ames and Brands was in his first season as Iowa's head coach. That's crazy that Iowa State finished in front of Iowa. These facts paint a not so rosy picture, but let's look at the full context of this year's tournament. Penn State rolled to another national title, its most dominant one yet, with an NCAA record 172.5 points. That's 2.5 more than the 1997 Iowa team that previously held the record. As the Nittany Lions rolled to history with 4 national champs, the only suspense in the team race was which teams would take 2nd and 3rd place. Heading into the final session, 8 programs were mathematically alive to finish in the top 3. Cornell, who finished 2nd, and Michigan, 3rd, ultimately took home hardware. But a win, Cornell finished 2nd? Man, that's crazy. But a win from Iaea in the 125-pound final would have tied Michigan for a 3rd place finish. The Hawkeyes were that close to bringing a team trophy back to Iowa City. When projected to finish 9th ahead of the tournament if seeding held. Also of note, after Penn State's 8 All-Americans, only Nebraska 5 had more than the Hawkeyes. Iowa tied several schools with 4. Okay, so that's a positive spin to things, I suppose. And of course, the analytics cannot account for the tumultuous season the Hawkeyes experienced, seeing several key members of the expected lineup taken off the map by the state's controversial gambling probe. Even without All-Americans Tony Cassioppi, what did I say? Caliente? Cassioppi and Nelson Brands and others, the Hawkeyes left Kansas City as a top 5 program. I don't think our guys were rattled, Brand said. Okay. The standard the Iowa program upholds is simple. The Hawkeyes want to be champions at each weight class. When you ask the goals of anyone in that wrestling room, the response is to be a national championship, regardless of where they are on the depth chart. Iowa fell short of that goal this year, but remained just inches away in one of the toughest tournaments in recent memory, despite the way the season began. Okay, fair enough. Our guys want to be champions, Brand said after the Big Ten tournament. This program wants to be champions. You're talking about a group of guys that are disappointed. Iowa's NCAA championship results. Two of the Hawkeyes, four All-Americans, Drake Iea, second place, and Michael Caliendo. Oh, I was right. But I was thinking of Cassiope. Can return next year. That's good. Jared Franick and Real Woods will graduate. Franick said after his match that he is unsure what comes next for him, but he may stop wrestling altogether. Regardless, he was grateful for the Iowa experience he got in one season. So I'm going to stop it right here. I could be wrong about this, but and I don't pay attention to wrestling as closely as I do basketball or football, but I still do pay attention. It does seem like there are other programs. So in wrestling, it's very similar to like swimming and sports like that, where it's an individual sport, where throughout the season you're building and you're building and you're building, and by the end of it, you want to be at peak form. And I guess that's the same for team sports as well, but it's definitely the case in individual sports. Okay. I remember as a water polo player, when I competed in swim, there would be all these different things that we would do in order to shave off that time and be the strongest that we could at the end of the season. Okay. Such as, for example, if you were in early season races, you would maybe wear like a longer swimsuit that would give you more drag, so that by the end of the season, when you took that off and maybe wore something tighter and more resistant of the water, and would allow you to swim smoother without any tread or drag or anything like that, you would be at your peak. So you would use all these different formulas to, by the end of it, be the strongest you could be. Okay. And there's other things that we did in swimming too, besides, like, for example, here's another one. During the season, we would not shave. Okay. I've never shaved in my life besides my face. You would not shave your arms or anything. Okay. Because you wanted to continue to practice. It's like practicing with weights when you're trying to jump higher. When you take it off, in theory, you can jump higher. In swimming, it's the same thing. You wouldn't shave your hair, okay? And you may not even wear a cap for every single race because you were okay with the drag. You were okay building up and tailoring and tapering as the season went along, okay? By the end of it, the final race, every swimmer would shave their arms, their legs, so that final race, you're fat. You guys get it, okay? So in wrestling, it's the same thing. And it seems to me that there are other programs that do it better, namely Penn State, where by the end of it, their guys are so effing ready, it's ridiculous. Iowa, on the other hand, seems the opposite. It seems sometimes they start solid, but as the year goes on, that improvement is not made, especially not across the board. And, like Spencer Lee, I know he won national champions. And I guess, even in the year that he didn't win the national championship, you could point to other years where by the end of it, maybe he had losses during the regular season, but by the end of it, he was super strong and won the national championship. And that would be a fair point. It just seems that there are better teams or teams that do it better than Iowa, of building and building and building. And by the end of the season, being like Big Ten championships and NCAAs that are more ready for the tournament because they're closer to their peak than maybe an Iowa would be. Now, I could be wrong about that, but that is kind of what I have observed. So, regardless of what you guys think about that, I th- th- it's something does need to change for Iowa wrestling because they just are not where, frankly, they should be. Now, Penn State is a program that realistically, it makes sense that they are where they are. I mean, Penn State as a school makes a lot of money. As a sports program, makes a lot of money. They have, but it's the same across all Big Ten schools. There's tremendous alumni volunteering and giving back to the university that they went to. So the resources are there. But I think the small changes could be in the build up during the season, the training that the Hawkeyes do throughout the year. It seems Penn State is maybe a little bit better and further ahead in on that regard. Perhaps Nelson or perhaps the brands are Tom Brands are a little bit behind in that matter and are a little bit more old school in their approach to training and being at tip-top peak shape by the end of the year. I also think what Iowa did by going into the transfer portal and getting somebody like Real Woods and what they were able to do this year by getting Franek and Caliendo was awesome. But it's also concerning because it's like, well, had they not gotten those two guys, this would have been like a legitimate rebuilding year. So let's just say, hypothetically speaking, okay, that Cassiope was able to wrestle, Nelson Brands was able to wrestle, and Iowa did not land Franek and Caliendo. I still think that this would have been a tremendous rebuild year. Cassiope probably would have done well. Brands, it's kind of hit or miss, you know, because but I would it have been possible for Brands to have a top 8 finish at the national championship? Yeah, I would say so. Would it be necessarily likely? I would not go as far to say that. Um, so that is concerning, but that's a hypothetical. Nonetheless, I do like that that's who they went and got. And that approach is good. That's really what the brands need to continue doing is recruiting hard coming out of high school and still developing top wrestlers from straight out of high school, but also getting maybe if a few recruits don't work out and a weight class is not as good as you would have hoped and it hasn't panned out the way that you would have hoped, you go to the transfer portal to get some of those guys to round out your roster. That from day one for every single sports, that is how I've seen the transfer portal. Not as the main source of your roster, okay, which some programs do that, okay? They do use the transfer portal as their main source of their player pool, rather using it as a means to round out your roster, okay? Um Woods was insightful following his third place bout defeat to Nebraska's Brock Hardy. He said he'll continue to try to compete somewhere with his college career done. He has learned how to perform in high pressure environments, academics at Stanford, and wrestling at Iowa. He may pursue a coaching career. Here were the results, guys. So, you know, um, I, regardless, guys, I really think that everybody feels the same when it comes to Iowa wrestling, that the expectation is for Iowa to year in, year out finish top 3. And that is just not what we have found. I'm trying to find any articles that give any honest feedback on Iowa's performance at the NCAA tournament, but I'm not really seeing much. Let's see what this one says. They take 5th. That being Iowa's finish in the team standing, just 4 points shy of the newly reduced top 3 trophies. 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 3 So, you know, my final analysis of this is your final team scores. The Iowa men 67 take fifth. Um, let's see what else we have here. So I know it's a little small here, but at Penn State 1, Cornell 2, Michigan 3, Iowa State 4, Iowa 5. Uh, so yeah, there's not really many reactions to this. Maybe listen, guys, I'm open to the possibility that this was a down year for Iowa and they were rebuilding, so on and so on, and maybe Penn State was just super, super good, and it's going to be rare for us to see a team like Penn State again. But um, you know, nonetheless, this is where we're at. I think most people I would agree with me on Iowa taking fifth. Of note, the Hawkeyes graduating seniors. Iowa's NCAA lineup included 3 graduating seniors: Brody Tess, Real Woods, and Jared Franick. Of note, the Hawkeyes have 69 top 10 finishes. Those are the All-Americans and the final results and the final team standings. All right, guys, moving along. We'll see what happens with Iowa wrestling. They do still have a lot of talent in the room, but I like I've been saying, I think the expectation is for Iowa to finish top 3, not to have schools like Cornell or Iowa. I mean, Iowa State historically had, they're not a nothing program, but it does sting a little bit that Iowa State finished ahead of Iowa, especially with Iowa, I believe, defeating them in the head-to-head. But and with Drake Iea coming back, assuming he comes back, plus uh, I believe it's Caliendo is coming back as well. They are going to have, let's take a look at their roster. So they finished 12-2. By the way, guys, this is definitely going to be a longer podcast because I'm addressing a few things. Yeah, Iowa beat Iowa State 18-14. So, but when all is said and done, the fact that Iowa lost to Michigan the way they did, and how badly they got beat by Penn State, but conversely, they also beat Oklahoma State. So, let's take a look at their roster. They definitely have a ton of talent. They have Gabe Arnold. He's coming up. Drake Iea. Caliendo's coming back. He'll be better than he was this year. Um, Franick is gone. Ben Keeter you have. We'll see what happens with his football and basketball career. So, there's still a lot of talent. We'll see what they do in the recruiting portal as well. All right, so moving on here, Iowa men's basketball. So, Iowa plays Utah tonight, and I did a video a week ago, maybe 2 weeks ago now, talking about the potential departure of Fran McCaffery. And I said that I don't think it's likely, but it is definitely possible. And I still stand by that. I don't think it's likely, but it is definitely possible. And if it would happen anytime, it would be now that Patrick McCaffery and Connor McCaffery have graduated. Although Patrick McCaffery technically can come back for one more year. Honestly, I kind of hope he decides to move on. I wish him the best. Obviously I don't feel any ill will towards him, but I do wish him the best. I'm more excited about some of the other young talent, and I think Patrick McCaffery will only be a roadblock to the development of the other talent on the roster, such as Price Sandfort, such as Lajai Dembele. I mean, Iowa has some legit forwards coming up. Cooper Koch is coming down the pipeline. Chris Taggio, who is nearly a 5-star recruit according to On3 recruiting rankings for him. So my stance on this year's team is this. In the end, I do believe that they have the talent to make the NCAA tournament. And when you look at the results of the NCAA tournament, such as Creighton making a Sweet 16, and some of the success that some of the teams have had that Iowa lost to, Iowa definitely played against some legit opponents this year. But what really hurt them is they weren't able to win at least one of those tough early games in Oklahoma, Iowa State. I'm blanking on who else they played. They played Purdue early. They weren't able to snag Creighton. They weren't able to snag one of those. And then early in the Big Ten year, they lost to teams like Michigan, who ended up not being nearly as good as expected. But overall, the record is not bad. And I do think while they have the talent to make the NCAA tournament, and I guarantee we're going to look back at this roster and say, man, how did they not make it? How did they not make the roster? How did they not make the NCAA tournament? I promise you, people will say that. And because it's the truth. If you look at the production of, especially on the offensive side of the ball, of the key contributors to this Iowa Hawkeye team, they absolutely met or exceeded where preseason expectations had them. Okay. Not to mention the production of the freshmen, including Owen Freeman, which nobody but me, and even I didn't see him doing this good, saw coming. Okay. With that said, if Iowa is able to beat Utah tonight, which is a big if, and they can reach the 20-win mark, this season won't be terrible. Okay. It won't be a complete loss. Winning 20 games is still not an easy thing to do. And at the end of the day, Iowa still did finish in the top half of the Big Ten, which is also very difficult to do. By the way, guys, let me know what you guys think of the new cut. I mean, it's pretty much the same as what I normally do, but I got a little mid fade there. That's what they call mid fade. But so with that said, I believe, guys, that by and large, we should be okay with Fran McCaffery. Okay. But with that in mind, because you look across the country at how things are, and you really look at Fran McCaffery's record at Iowa, it's pretty darn good. Okay. This guy is pretty much has turned Iowa into a guaranteed 20-win team every single year. Okay. Or close to it, plus or minus a game or two. And that's not for nothing. Under Fran McCaffery's watch, Iowa won the most games that they have ever won in the history of Iowa basketball. All right. Now, I know not every season is created equally, and other eras played maybe less games. I get all that. Okay. But still, it's not nothing. But I do understand the apathy. I do. And especially if Fran McCaffery is going to continue this ignorance of the defensive side of the ball, Iowa fans are going to continue to feel hopeless, because until the feeling is from Iowa fans that until that is given serious and proper attention, it's the same as Iowa football. There's only going to be so far that Iowa can go. And I understand that. I do. I'm going to go ahead and pull up some of the results from the NCAA tournament here. Now, with that said, even on one hand, while I do think we should be okay with Fran McCaffery, time is running out. Okay. And I believe that we should give him a guaranteed 3 more years. And there's 2 reasons why I'm saying 3 more years. One is, while he hasn't had a ton of success in the NCAA tournament, which I'll revisit here in a second, he has had pretty strong regular season success. Okay. And he did win a Big Ten tournament title, which is pretty cool as well. And that doesn't count for nothing either. So that's one. The second thing is that Iowa has really, really, really strong talent coming up. The freshman class and the 2 freshmen that Iowa will be bringing in next year, in Cooper Koch, or Coach, whatever it is, or Coke. I think it's Coach. And Chris Taggio. I love those 2 pieces. Both those guys stand 6'8", 6'9", but they provide drastically different games to the Iowa Hawkeyes. In Cooper Coach, you're getting a supremely talented, high IQ basketball player, and in Chris Taggio, you're getting a super, super athletic, really strong defender and rebounder with a ton of upside. Okay. Hopefully, Peyton Sandfort decides to return next year. A lot of this is depending on his decision. If he decides to return next year, Iowa will have a really nice roster. So those are the 2 main reasons I say the 3 years, because I'm basically saying, given the talent that Fran McCaffery has, this is, in a nutshell, this is what I'm saying. Given the talent that Fran McCaffery has, I want to give him one more shot to see that talent through. Thus, the 3 years. Well, 4 including this year, but 3 after this year. And that's what it is. That's what it is. So, but he has to improve defensively. He has to. And if he doesn't do it next year, it's going to be shortened to just one more year after that, because at a certain point, enough is enough. If there's no semblance of change, you have to be willing to cut your losses and stand firm and say, no, enough is enough here. So that's where I stand with Fran McCaffery. I don't think this season was a total loss, but I do think it was still a underperforming season given the talent that Iowa had. But what are you going to do? So lastly, and a lot of this is going to depend on tonight's game against Utah. If Iowa can still reach the 20 wins, okay, the season is not totally lost. But they absolutely have the talent to make it. And in the end, what let them down was defense, as it has multiple years in a row now, where their offense was still really good, but it wasn't as good as it was in years past. And thus, you had an up and down season where, depending on how the offense did, basically determined the outcome of the game. So the last thing I want to talk about is Kadyn Proctor. And, really the only new information that I have heard about him is that, and like I said, I really, the primary source of information came vis-a-vis Sean Bach and David Eichholt. And Sean Bach really did toe the line and was very delicate with this matter. As I had said at the beginning of the video, that 9 times out of 10, that's going to be what you guys get, is somebody who's not willing to think say what they really think and what they believe is going on, but rather just wants to keep the peace so they keep their relationships, so they can continue to have these artificial interviews with athletes. But David Eichholt, I thought, was fairly honest, and I commend him for that. But the only other piece of information on it was this. The question was, did Kadyn Proctor, this is the only other theory, did Kadyn Proctor just not gel at Iowa? And this was primarily from Sean Buck, okay, where he was essentially saying that, as I said would happen, essentially it was Iowa's fault, that Iowa's culture is super rigid. It's the Iowa way, and it didn't work out for Kadyn Proctor, or something to the effect of he didn't gel with his teammates or things like that. But he wasn't even really that confident of that, because all the reports that they had gotten was that most of the players were willing to look past him spurning Iowa that first go around. Not all of them, so, especially the freshman class, kind of had an approach of, okay, well, we'll wait and see. We'll see when you get here. We'll see what you're capable of doing, and whether you are willing to put your money where your mouth is, and do things the Iowa way. But that was really the only other theory, is maybe it wasn't what he was expecting. Maybe Iowa wasn't what he was thinking it was going to be.
And personally, I think that's nonsense. I don't think that he had an expectation of what Iowa football is, and it turned out to be something that he just couldn't work with. Everybody knows what Iowa football is, okay? So I don't believe that for a second. I think all this absolutely has to do with NIL money. And I do want to touch upon some comments. Like, there were people in the comment section saying, especially like non-Iowa fans, who were like, well, the fact that you're talking about Kadyn Proctor leaving your program is a symptom of a bigger problem. It's like, dude, it's a big story. Okay. This is not just a big story for Iowa, but a big story across the country. Everybody was covering it. Okay. This dude spurned Iowa twice. The second time he left Alabama, and then he goes to the other program, doesn't even make it through spring practice, and goes elsewhere. It's a big story. Huge story. So Purdue in the Sweet 16. Yeah. So I don't I don't think that that's what it is. I don't think he got to Iowa and was expecting one thing and got another. I personally, I think that this was the plan all along, where he went to Iowa kind of half-heartedly the whole time, underneath it all, knowing that he could go back to Alabama if he wanted to. But in the meantime, he could get a little something, something from Iowa now. And I think that that's really what happened. And he has no issues with it whatsoever. And, you know, my thing is, I'm not judging per se him doing that. I just want him to be honest. That's all I ask for, is honesty. And those of you who are like, well, and even Sean and David Eichholt were saying this, well, they're kids, and they kids make rash decisions and do things spur of the moment. Okay. You know how much money these people are making? They're not kids, they're adults. All right. Now, granted, they are young adults, and I'm not saying, you can't have some empathy or sympathy for some of the decisions, but they're adults. All right. And they're making tons of money, and that money directly comes from fans' pockets. All right. So critique is absolutely okay if you're so inclined to give it. I also want to address let's read the comments. I'm going to pull up the video and read some of the comments, but also they said that the Swarm Collective came out publicly and said that the donations that were given from fans to the Swarm did not go, not a dime of it went to Kadyn Proctor, because that was one of the things that I had discussed is, man, what a travesty that basically you can. So this is how it can work in theory. Swarm Collective or any entity, it doesn't even need to be the Swarm Collective, can advertise and say, hey, you should donate so we can get these really, really good players. And especially this player right here, we're going to get, if you just donate, we're going to get. Then these people give the money. And then that player doesn't even end up playing a down for that school, or they don't even land that player. Now, again, it's a donation, so it's not complete false advertising, but it's still not the best. It's not. It still sucks, and I totally understand why some fans are like, "Screw this! I'm not going to donate only for us to lose out on recruits, and they can just spurn us." But like I said, according to David and Sean, Swarm said not a dime of it of fan donations went to Kadyn Proctor. I think they even said that he didn't even get any Swarm Collective money. That basically all he had was like commercials and kind of like other businesses within the state of Iowa who gave him a chance to advertise their business under his name as Kadyn Proctor. So I'm here to tell you, I think that that's rubbish. I like the Swarm, and I want the Swarm to be as successful as possible, but I don't think not a dime went to Kadyn Proctor. I think that that's far fetched. I'm pretty sure that he got something. Okay. Now, what I will say is, while I understand your frustration as an Iowa fan, and I'm frustrated too, at the end of the day, if we want to be a good program, we still have to give and donate. Okay. The only reason that players like Jay Higgins, Nick Jackson, Sebastian Castro decided to come back this year was because of the Swarm Collective. That Swarm was able to offer up a sufficient enough price for them to return that they said, okay, you know what? It's worth it to come back. Because at this point, it's not just enough to weigh the pros and cons of, well, if I come back for one more year, will I be able to improve my draft stock? Do I really love the university, or would I rather, and do I love it enough to where I can come back one more year and I only get to do the college experience one time, so may as well get the most out. No. It's not just that anymore. Okay. Loyalty, all of those old fashioned words are out the window. Is it financially better for me to return, or comparable for me to return, as opposed to going to the NFL? That's what it comes down to. So, and the fact that Iowa was able to get those guys back, which was a big deal. Okay. It was a big deal that they were able to get those guys back. Matter of fact, if I had to pick between Iowa landing Kadyn Proctor and being able to have Jay Higgins, Sebastian Castro, and Nick Jackson return, I would pick Nick Jackson, Jay Higgins, and Sebastian Castro over Kadyn Proctor any day. Any day. So from that standpoint, guys, we still need to have the Swarm Collective be a strong organization. Okay. NIL is a big deal. And while I get that it hurts that Kadyn Proctor left, so be it. It is what it is. It's not going to work out with him in Iowa. It's just not going to work out. And it is what it is. You know, it does suck, but more, you know what? Go to Alabama. Fair enough. I mean, I don't know. Would it have been nice to see him suiting up in an Iowa uniform, especially with his teammate Xavier Wampa? Of course. But it's not going to happen, guys. It's not going to happen. So, and does this point to a larger issue? Does this point to a lack of character on Kadyn Proctor's? Yeah, maybe, probably. But at the end of the day, Iowa still has a solid program. We still need to have a strong Swarm Collective.
and we were still able to attain and retain players like Nick Jackson, Jay Higgins, and Sebastian Castro, which is a big deal. Okay. So you still need to be invested in the Swarm Collective. Okay. And this is why I've told you guys in the past, you cannot live and die by recruiting, especially in today's day and age. You can't. I used to be somebody who, if a player chose not to play at Iowa, it would affect me for like 2-3 days. You can't do that to yourself, because there's so many aspects to this and elements to this that are beyond your control, that you just cannot take it to heart. All right. Um, so with regards to this, you cannot allow Kadyn Proctor's decision to spurn Iowa for a second time to hurt you so much to where you can't see the big picture of trying to have the Swarm Collective be as strong as possible so that Iowa players can be compensated as best as possible. Therefore, Iowa has a strong program. You can't lose sight of that. All right. Finally, we're going to read some comments here. Michael Weber, thanks for your take, Nolan. 100% college football and basketball is Wild Wild West. Escape Club 1988. Love the South Park reference. Yeah, because I gave the example of South Park did a video, an episode where Cartman is, well, I'm not going to say everything about it. I don't want to offend anybody here. Nah, I'm just kidding. I don't care if I offend anybody, but um, essentially the joke is that at the time, the NCAA was the only organization that was able to essentially get free labor from people. And Eric Carmen like takes on the persona of, like somebody from the South 100 years ago. Uh, and the thing about it was that it was very true. I mean, think about it. Like, the NCAA is the only organization that is able to make money, or was able to make money from the talents of these college kids, and those college kids get nothing in return. They were the only organization in recent memory to be able to get away with something like that. Now we've gone the opposite direction, where there's too much power in the hands of the players, and it's the wild, wild west where capitalism is running amok, and the only thing that talks is money. So that's what he's talking about. I made reference to the South Park episode with Eric Carmen going to University of Colorado, and anyways, look it up, guys. You guys can look up that episode. If any Iowa fans are that worked up about one player, that might be a sign you've got bigger issues to worry about. Iowa just got a new OC. Focus on that. Focus on that. So stupid. It's like, dude, like I said, this is a big news story. I make content. Of course, I'm going to talk about this. And then this person said, I heard that the Snapchat he made to his girlfriend is circulating again. If you know, you know. I asked him what that is, but I didn't get a response. Proctor, go back home to Alabama and stay. No more games. He needs to call where else a home? Iowa tampered first, and now you're saying it's about the money? Come on, man. No. That's not. Okay. Number one, Iowa tampering is comparatively a pretty minor thing. They kept in touch with a former player that they recruited. Comparatively with the actual landscape of things, not a big deal. But all I was saying is the fact. I wasn't comparing tampering with the fact that he takes. They're not a like for like comparison. Okay. It's not like, oh, Iowa tampered, therefore I should just be okay that Kadyn Proctor decided to leave because of the. No, they're totally separate situations. I mean, I don't even care at this point. The transfer rules and NIL are just so stupid. I totally agree. He figured out that he made a mistake. Iron sharpened iron at Alabama. NIL is 100% right, but this type of stuff damaged the product. Players shutting it down during the season, knowing they will enter
the portal also stinks. Eventually, kids will be drafted out of high school and paid like MLB draft. That's a good point. I agree. Will be better for everyone. Players union, contracts, reduced rosters, etc. I agree. And I think that that's where it's headed. This is probably the best comment in the comment section right here by Joey NY2up. I completely agree with that. That is absolutely where we're headed. We are headed more toward now, by the way, college baseball has seen an uptick in talent, and eventually things have a way of working themselves out. But I do completely agree that we are heading towards like a minor league and a professional league rather than a college student athlete situation and a professional league, because we're already well past that. And we will be getting a players union. We will be getting contracts, and we will be getting reduced rosters because there will no longer be scholarship distributions and stuff like that. So, anyways, guys, that's going to do it for me. Not really much more I've heard about it other than that. Like I said, I totally disagree. I don't think Proctor got to Iowa and decided, oh, this is different than what I expected. That's nonsense. Um, you know, he just I don't, from day one, I don't think, even when he committed to Iowa, I don't think he really genuinely cared to play at Iowa. He from moment one coming out of high school, he has looked down on Iowa, and at the end of the day, his decision was absolutely financially motivated. And I would go as far to say that from day one, he was, even when he committed to Iowa, that deep down inside, he knew that the door was open for him to return to Alabama. So if he so chose, and in the meantime, he'd be able to get a little something, something from the University of Iowa. All right, guys, thank you guys so much for watching. Be sure to smash the subscribe button, leave a comment. Helps the engagement with the video. Like or dislike, doesn't matter. Definitely helps the engagement regardless. And last but not least, DBAP, don't be a pussy with all facts or feelings, because your feelings just don't matter. Love you guys. See you guys next time. Go Hawks. Bye-bye.